Have you ever found yourself, like, totally lost in a show? Maybe binge watching way too late or, scrolling through some influencer's feed and you feel weirdly close to them.
Oh, definitely. Like you're right there with them, sharing their life somehow.
Exactly. And then you catch yourself thinking about them afterwards, maybe even having little imaginary chats or feeling genuinely let down if they, I don't know, take a break or do something that just doesn't fit the picture you have.
Yeah, that feeling, it's so familiar, isn't it? But it's
That's
completely one-sided. They have absolutely no idea who you are.
right. It's strange, but I think loads of us feel it. It's surprisingly powerful.
It really is. It's pretty much everywhere in our, media-soaked world. And what you're describing, that's the absolute core of what we call parasocial relationship.
Parasocial relationships. Okay.
Yeah. And they aren't just like fleeting moments of, oh, I recognize that person. These are these really fascinating, sometimes quite deep-seated and fundamentally one-sided connections.
The ones we build up with who, like celebrities, media people.
Media personalities, celebrities, yeah, even fictional characters. And interestingly, brands, too.
Brands. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, they feel incredibly real to us. They can affect us quite deeply, but it's all happening, on your side of the screen, in your head, basically.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today, this whole complex world of parasocial relationships.
Right.
So for this deep dive, we've gathered a ton of research. We're talking master's theses, big analyses, studies from all sorts of scientific angles.
You're drawing on the kind of the foundational stuff, like the work from Donald Horton and Richard Wohl. They're the sociologists who actually coined the term way back in 1956.
56. Wow.
Right up to the latest cutting-edge research, looking at how social media is just completely changing these bonds in ways they probably couldn't have dreamed of back then.
So our mission today, for you listening, is pretty straightforward. We want to help you really unpack what these parasocial relationships actually are.
We'll look at the surprising benefits because, yeah, there are some genuine upsides, but also get into the hidden downsides.
And crucially, we want to explore what happens when these connections, which feel so strong but are kind of illusory, when they break.
That phenomenon, yeah, it's called a parasocial breakup. And as you'll see, it can actually hit pretty hard, emotionally, psychologically.
Right. So hopefully, get ready for a few aha moments that might genuinely change how you look at, the media you consume and maybe even shed light on some dynamics in your real-life connections, too.
Okay, so where do we even start trying to understand these unseen connections? Let's maybe go back to the beginning, to when mass media was just starting to, weave its way into everyday life.
Good idea. The concept itself really came into focus in 1956, thanks, as I mentioned, to those sociologists Donald Horton and Richard Wohl.
Right.
They were looking closely at the rise of television, seeing how these talking heads, these characters, were suddenly in people's living rooms, creating this totally new kind of social feel. Intimacy at a distance, wasn't that the phrase they used?
Exactly. Intimacy at a distance. They saw people forming these bonds, often feeling like the TV personalities were talking right to them. Building up this sense of familiarity, even though they'd obviously never met. It was a pretty groundbreaking idea for the time. But what's really interesting, I think, is that while Horton and Wohl gave us the name, the basic idea of a parasocial interaction, well, it isn't totally brand new.
How do you mean?
Well, if you think about it from a broader human psychology angle, people have always formed bonds with figures they don't directly interact with, right?
Okay, yeah, like historical figures.
Exactly. Revered kings, charismatic politicians, even, religious figures, gods, spirits. People have projected feelings, trust, loyalty onto distant figures or even abstract ideas for centuries.
So mass media didn't invent it, it just ramped it up.
It amplified it massively, yeah, and made it a normal part of everyday life, extending it to this huge range of public personas we see now.
Okay, that makes sense. It broadens the context quite a bit. So if this basic idea has been around, how do we separate just like a quick interaction from a proper relationship in this media context?
That's a great question. And the research we looked at really emphasizes this crucial academic distinction between parasocial interaction, or PSI, and a parasocial relationship, or PSR.
PSI and PSR. Got it.
Yeah. And it's important because, honestly, even in academic research, these two terms have often been kind of conflated conceptually and methodologically, as one paper put it back in 2016.
So they get mixed up sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Getting the difference clear really helps us understand the nuances of these bonds.
Okay, so break it down for us. What's PSI?
Right. So parasocial interaction, PSI, that's like the initial spark. the moment of engagement.
Like when a talk show host looks right at the camera.
Perfect example. Or, when a character in a show breaks the fourth wall and talks straight to the audience.
Yeah.
It creates this illusion of a two-way chat, a simulation of conversational give and take, as the research calls it.
Okay, so it's that feeling of being addressed directly.
Exactly. And it's often tied just to that moment you're watching or listening. It's kind of fleeting, but it's the seed, the foundation.
And then PSR, that's the deeper thing.
That's the deeper thing, yeah. A parasocial relationship, PSR, that forms after repeated and sustained exposure to that media person.
So watching the same news anchor every night or following a YouTuber for months.
Precisely. That's when you, the media user, start to develop these much deeper illusions of intimacy, friendship, and identification.
You feel like you actually know them.
Right. You learn more positive stuff about them, supposedly, which makes you feel more attracted to them, and the relationship kind of grows and solidifies in your mind.
So it's not just in the moment anymore, it sticks with you.
Exactly. It becomes this ongoing, persistent bond. Still one-sided, of course, but you carry around with you, even when you're not actively consuming the media.
And you said this distinction matters not just for academics.
Yeah, I think it does, because if we're not clear, we might just be measuring whether someone, likes a character, rather than understanding the real depth of a parasocial connection.
Right, just admiring them versus feeling this bond.
Exactly. Some of the older measurement scales maybe struggle with that. Newer ones, like something called the EPSI scale, try to get a more nuanced picture of the actual ongoing engagement. It just shows how tricky it is to study these things properly.
So, okay, we have interaction and maybe relationship. But the core thing, you said, is this illusion of reciprocity. It feels two-way, but it isn't.
Absolutely fundamental. It's one-sided. No matter how real or personal it feels to you, the media user, you are essentially a stranger to the persona.
Unlike a real friendship where you get to know each other.
Right. There's no normal social interaction flowing back, and crucially, you have no direct control over the actions of the side it observes. It's all happening in your perception, your experience.
And yet, it feels so real sometimes. Why is that?
Well, this is the compelling part. Our sources stress that very similar psychological processes are working in both parasocial and face-to-face interactions.
So our brains kind of process them similarly.
It seems that way,
Yeah.
which is why these bonds feel surprisingly real and are actually considered psychologically normal. It's not some weird outlier behavior.
It's like our brains are just wired for connection, and this is another way.
That's a great way to put it. Our brains, wired for social belonging, are finding these new, albeit one-sided ways to get some of that need met in this media-heavy world. It's not just about being entertained. It's about tapping into something pretty fundamental about being human.
So why do we do it? Why invest the energy? You mentioned needs.
Yeah, the research points towards something called the uses and gratifications approach. It's a theory from communication studies, popped up in the early 70s.
Okay.
And the basic idea is that we actively choose media to satisfy specific needs. So for PSI and PSR, it suggests they offer genuine companionship and personal identity.
Companionship.
Well, think about it. The persona, the celebrity, the character, they often seem to offer trust and self-disclosure. They share bits of their lives, their thoughts, maybe even vulnerabilities.
Right. You feel like you're getting the inside scoop.
Exactly, and that makes you feel directly connected, loyal even, much as they are connected to their close friends, as one study puts it. It becomes this powerful substitute or maybe a supplement for our real-world social needs. It gives us something back, a unique kind of gratification.
Okay, so we've got the basics, the history, but now the digital age. Social media, this must have completely changed things, right? Supercharged them.
Oh, absolutely. Change the whole landscape. Social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all of them, they haven't just tweaked how we interact. They've drastically intensified both the initial interactions, the PSI, and the development of those deeper relationships, the PSRs. It's a whole different level now.
How so? What's the main difference?
Well, fundamentally, they provide more opportunities for intimate, reciprocal, and frequent interactions, or at least the feeling of them.
Right, you can comment, you can follow, send DMs.
Exactly. That constant, often immediate back and forth gives this really strong illusion of a real dialogue. Plus, the sheer consistency in which the persona appears in your feed.
They're just always there.
They're always there, multiple times a day sometimes. That alone can make them feel much more intimate to you. And a really key point, the internet basically downsizes the gatekeeping processes of old media.
Less filtering.
Way less filtering, less curation by big networks or studios. You get this flood of seemingly unfiltered, raw, maybe more authentic information straight from the source or perceived source to the audience. It makes the connection feel way more direct, more personal, just much more accessible than it ever used to be.
Okay, let's maybe look at specific platforms because they feel different, don't they? Like Twitter versus YouTube.
They definitely foster these connections differently. Take Twitter. It allows for that feeling of a direct connection, right? And you get access to what feels like everyday information about people.
Little thoughts, random updates.
Yeah. And even if you only get, like, that super rare reply or a retweet from a big name, that tiny interaction can seriously reinforce the parasocial bond, makes you feel noticed,
Yes.
acknowledged.
And it's not just one-to-one, is it? The follower count thing.
Right. That plays a huge role in perceived social influence. When someone's trending, it's like this massive global validation. It gives them huge influence, social capital. And for followers, just being part of that, engaging with it, can make you feel like you're part of something bigger, something important.
Okay, so that's Twitter. What about YouTube? That feels closer somehow.
It often does, yeah. Especially with the vlogging format. Vloggers offer this almost constant insight into their daily lives, sharing personal stuff, thoughts, routines.
Even the boring stuff sometimes.
The boring stuff. And that level of self-disclosure leads to incredibly close one-sided relationships with viewers. You see it in the comments, the fan communities, fan art. It's intense.
The creators want that, right? It's part of the job.
It's absolutely part of the business model. Content creators actively desire to interact with their fan base through comments or posts because that engagement, that loyalty, that's what drives views and ultimately their income.
It's that weird paradox, though, isn't it? I read something Megan Verhamnish at The Verge wrote about this.
Oh, yeah. What'd she say?
She said these parasocial relationships are vital to YouTubers' success. They build the loyal community. But, and this is the flip side, viewers who feel friendship or intimacy with their favorite creators can also have higher expectations and stronger reactions when those expectations are disappointed.
Ah, yes, the entitlement factor.
Exactly. Because creators often make money directly from fans, through memberships, Patreon, merch. Some fans start to feel like they're owed something.
Like they have a right to know specific details of the creator's life or demand certain content. It creates this really blurry, difficult line between their private life and their public work. Must be incredibly stressful. And that perceived relationship gets even more complex with things like live streaming, right? Like on Twitch.
Yeah, Twitch feels like another step closer again.
It does. Academics are trying to pin it down. They've started using the term cyber-social relations for these interactions.
Cybersocial, okay.
Yeah, they see it as being in a middle position, somewhere between purely social, like chatting with friends, and purely parasocial.
Why the middle?
Because you have both reciprocity and temporal proximity. You're there live, interacting in the chat. Sometimes the streamer responds directly to you. You're sharing the moment. But there's still no spatial proximity, no bodily contact. You're not physically there.
Right. You're sharing time, not space. But those chats, they build real communities, don't they?
Massively. Twitch chat becomes this virtual hangout spot for millions. And the Treevers themselves, the pros anyway, often have personal schedules, like regular shows.
Like tuning in for your favorite program.
Exactly. That predictability helps viewers maintain their relationships with streamers. You know when your friend is going to be on, you can tune in, chat with other fans, feel part of that regular social event.
But there's a darker side to that intimacy too, especially on Twitch.
Unfortunately, yes. A very dark side, particularly for female streamers. Our sources point out that the very closeness the platform enables can lead to horrific stuff. Extreme harassment, rape and death threats, blackmailing, stalking, and worse.
Wow, that's terrifying.
It's becoming a serious occupational hazard. Some male viewers, especially after hours and hours of watching and interacting, can develop obsessive feelings of romantic and sexual entitlement towards the streamers. It's a really stark reminder that this illusion of intimacy can curdle into something genuinely dangerous.
So, okay, with all of these platforms, what's the secret sauce? What makes these connections feel so compelling, so real, especially online?
Fundamentally, a lot of it seems to boil down to responsiveness, or at least the perception of responsiveness.
Like in real relationships, being attentive, listening.
Exactly. In our face-to-face relationships, partner responsiveness, attentiveness, listening, caring, validation. That's crucial for intimacy. And fascinatingly, the research shows this same principle applies, maybe in a simulated way, to parasocial relationships too.
How does that work if it's one-sided?
Well, it's about how much the media figure seems relationally within reach or available for communication.
So if they feel accessible.
Right. Think about politicians who engage directly online or seem easy to contact at giving. They tend to build stronger bonds. But if, say, a celebrity's Twitter is obviously run by a PR team, or the replies feel canned,
That distance reduces the feeling.
it can, yeah. That perceived lack of access can lessen the PSI. The perception of potential interaction, even if it rarely happens, seems to fuel the connection.
And it's not always about direct replies either, is it? There was something about vicarious interaction.
Yes. That's a fascinating concept, is when you see other audience members having positive interactions with the
By
persona.
seeing them reply to someone else's comment.
Exactly. Seeing that happen can actually boost your own sense of a parasocial relationship with them. You're not just watching passively. You're kind of imagining, what if they replied to me like that?
Ah, so it's the potential for connection.
Precisely. This idea of relationship potential, the thought that interaction could theoretically happen, seemed to be a really powerful driver in building these PSRs. You see others connect and you think, maybe me too.
Okay, so we've defined them, traced them, seen how tech amps them up. Let's get practical now, the impact. It sounds like it's a real double-edged sword, right? Benefits, but also definite downsides.
Absolutely. It's not all bad, not by a long shot. On the upside, parasocial connections can genuinely supplement our social needs. They can help decrease loneliness.
Especially for people who maybe find real-world connections difficult.
Exactly. Or during specific times, like the COVID lockdowns. For millions, those mediated interactions became a kind of virtual lifeline, offering companionship, consistency. As one expert, Professor Terrell, pointed out, these relationships are not necessarily dangerous and can be healthy and provide people with some meaning in life. They're filling a real human need.
And what about, like, development, especially for younger people?
Huge impact there. Identity formation and learning. Research shows kids learn from both positive and negative role models on TV, picking up norms, standards for behavior.
There's that wishful identification thing too,
Yeah.
right?
Where kids connect with characters they want to be like. Boys might go for intelligent characters, girls maybe for attractive ones, according to some studies. These imagined relationships become a sort of safe space to explore who you want to be.
And because there's no actual contact.
There's no risk of rejection. That's a key benefit. You get the positive social interaction feel without the potential sting of real-life social dynamics. Adolescents especially can attach fantasized attributes onto these figures, projecting their own needs onto them. It's a low-stakes lab for identity exploration.
Does it actually help learning, though? Like those kids' shows where they talk to the screen?
It seems so. Think Dora the Explorer. Characters address the audience directly, creating these pseudo-conversations. Kids genuinely feel like they're friends, and research backs it up. Children seem to learn better from characters they have a PSR with.
Really? How did they test that?
There was a cool study with toddlers learning a task. They learned better from Elmo, who they already had a connection with, compared to a new character called Dodo. But, and this is the kicker, when they gave the kids nurturing Dodo toys first, letting them build a bond.
Their learning from Dodo improved.
Significantly. It suggests that fostering that parasocial connection actually boosts cognitive engagement and learning. Even personalized toys, programmed with a kid's name, seem to enhance learning by deliberately building that one-sided bond.
Wow. Okay. And beyond learning. Any other psychological pluses?
For some people, yeah. PSRs can link to higher self-confidence, a stronger perception of problem-focused coping strategies, and a stronger sense of belonging. So real, measurable benefits for well-being in certain cases.
Okay, but now the downside, the other edge of the sword.
Right, and it's a significant one. Professor Terrell also gave a crucial warning. Many of these personas have commercial interests in mind and are trying to sell a particular type of product or lifestyle.
Ah, the selling aspect.
Yeah, you could be taken advantage of if they're not mindful that this person is not actually their friend. It's often, especially now, about profit, influence, marketing. You have to remember the transactional element is often there.
That's a really important reality check. And what about expectations? Comparing your life to theirs.
That's another big pitfall. Constantly comparing your own messy, real life to the seemingly appealing life that the person lives online, which is usually heavily curated and filtered.
Yeah, you only see the highlights.
Exactly. Celebrities and influencers often hide the negative aspects of their life. They present this edited reality. And trying to measure up to that impossible standard can lead straight to depression and a decrease in self-esteem. It's a comparison you just can't win.
And body image, that must be huge too.
Huge. We already know media exposure can negatively predict body image in teens. Parasocial relationships can unfortunately amplify that, mainly through those social comparisons, just a constant stream of ideal bodies.
Although wasn't there a weird twist with superheroes?
Ah, yes, that was interesting. A study on men and superheroes found that seeing muscular characters led to poorer self-perception, unless they already had a PSR with the superhero.
So the connection somehow protected them.
It seemed to eliminate the negative effect, like the bond provided some kind of psychological buffer.
Yeah.
But that's a specific case. The general issue, especially now with beauty filters on social media everywhere,
Oh God, yeah. Those filters.
they edit the appearance of the creator, giving this completely false reality to viewers, which just makes body image issues worse for so many people.
And it can get even worse, more obsessive.
It can, unfortunately. If these PSRs become too intense or aren't balanced with real life, they can be the source of feelings of inferiority, create a false sense of reality, contribute to obsessive online behaviors, and withdrawal from real-life friendships. The imagined world starts taking over.
Can you give an example of that pressure, maybe on the influencer side?
Yeah, there's a really compelling example. Natasha Fabrizi, she was on Married at First Sight Australia,
Yeah.
and her fame just exploded overnight. Huge following, like 70,000 people suddenly feeling this intense connection to her.
Wow, that must have been overwhelming.
Totally. She talked openly about the pressure of constantly giving them these valuable energy deposits and how, as an introvert, it left her feeling completely drained.
And the entitlement thing came up again.
Big time. Fans felt entitled to specific details of her life, demanded her attention. People even asked her to share GoFundMe pages, which she had to stop doing because she couldn't verify them. Her experience just perfectly shows the immense pressure, the need to constantly curate your platform for your brand is for commercial reasons. It sounds exhausting.
So these bonds form, they can be intense. But what happens when they break? When the show ends, the character dies, the celebrity steps back.
That's what researchers call a parasocial breakup, or PSD. Isle and Cohen defined it back in 2003 as a situation where a character with whom a viewer has developed a PSR goes off the air.
So it could be a show ending, character death, celebrity vanishing.
Exactly. Or even an influencer just stopping posting for a while. Anything that terminates that regular exposure and perceived connection.
And does it actually feel like a real breakup?
The distress experienced is often described as quite similar to losing a real social relationship, usually weaker in intensity, maybe shorter-lived. But the feelings can echo real loss.
And how bad it feels depends on how strong the bond was.
Exactly. The level of distress depends on the strength and extremity of the bond you formed. For some, it might be pretty easy just avoiding the content and moving on. For others, it can be a really significant emotional blow.
And does our own psychology play into how we react, like attachment styles?
Fascinatingly, yes. Parasocial breakups connect directly to psychological attachment theory, the same framework we use for real relationships.
How so?
Research suggests people with an anxious attachment style in real life, who worry a lot about abandonment, need a lot of closeness, they tend to have more extreme reactions to parasocial breakups too.
Okay. And secure or avoidant types?
They generally react less intensely. What's really interesting, though, is that someone's actual real-life social situation, like how many friends they have, does not affect the intensity of distress or discomfort felt from a PSB.
So even if you have great real-life support, losing that media connection can still hurt.
It seems so. The parasocial bond exists kind of independently in that sense.
Does age matter?
Yeah, age seems to be a factor.
Yeah.
Sources suggest younger people, especially under 20, are more susceptible to strong symptoms of PSB.
Maybe because it's a time of big identity formation, more reliance on media figures.
That makes sense, yeah. Their emotional worlds might be more closely tied to those figures during that developmental stage.
Can we talk about real-world examples, especially when things get messy, like when information comes out about a celebrity that clashes with how you see them, that cognitive dissonance thing?
Ah, yes, cognitive dissonance, highly relevant here.
Yeah.
Think about something like the huge public interest in the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial.
Right, that was everywhere.
Professor Terrell used this as a great example. Say you're a fan, you have this strong, positive view of Johnny Depp maybe as this funny, quirky character. Then suddenly you're hit with all this conflicting information, details suggesting behavior that just doesn't fit your view.
It feels wrong. Uncomfortable.
Exactly. It's very discomforting. It's uncomfortable to have this notion that your favorite character is behaving in a way that is inconsistent with the way you view him. Your brain hates that inconsistency.
So what does it do?
It tries to resolve the discomfort, often by dismissing the new conflicting information or maybe reinterpreting it to fit the existing view. Anything to reduce that uncomfortable dissonance.
And what about the public figures themselves in these situations? Like Natasha Fabrizi again, did she talk about dealing with controversy?
She did. Despite knowing she might get backlash from fans, she felt this duty to be a good example. She said she'd speak up about it if she strongly disagreed with a public person's actions.
Even if it cost her followers.
Yeah, though she also wryly noted that in today's climate, taking a stand could ironically be a smart move for engagement. It just highlights that really complex tightrope they walk, balancing their persona, fan expectations, personal values, all under this intense public scrutiny.
Now, you mentioned earlier that bonds with fictional characters can sometimes be even stronger. That sounds counterintuitive.
It does. But research suggests it's often true. PSRs with fictional characters can be more intense. A big reason seems to be that feeling of being completely present in a fictional world.
You get totally immersed.
Totally. You suspend disbelief in a way you can't or don't with a real person whose messy reality is always kind of there in the background.
What makes that immersion so strong?
Two things, mainly. Narrative realism, does the fictional world feel believable within its own rules? And external realism, do parts of it connect to real-world experiences or emotions?
Yeah.
When both are strong, it really heightens the connection, creates this deep desire for camaraderie with the characters.
Like with huge franchises, Harry Potter, Star Wars.
Perfect examples. Those mega franchises are masters at this. They let fans engage more deeply, way beyond just watching. There's fan fiction, social media groups, theme parks. It becomes a whole world.
So losing a character from that kind of world
Can be devastating. For people who are deeply attached, the dread of a fictional character's death, that ultimate parasocial breakup, can be much stronger than that of a parasocial breakup with a public figure. Because their whole existence is that narrative. When it ends, they're gone completely.
That actually makes a lot of sense. It's a total end. It's interesting, though, how scandals with actors can affect the character.
Right, an actor scandal can cause a PSB with the fictional character they play. People might reevaluate the character because the actor's real-life actions sort of taint the perception.
But it doesn't work the other way around. Like, liking an actor doesn't automatically make you like their character more.
Generally, no. A positive view of an actor outside the role does not apply to the character in the same way. The character is usually seen as separate. Your bond with, say, Han Solo is distinct from your opinion of Harrison Ford.
Okay. And sometimes these fictional bonds get really deep, right? Like that Brawny study.
Oh, the Brony study project on My Little Pony fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fascinating. Published in 2018, it found that fans of different characters exhibited distinct psychological profiles that often mirrored their chosen character's canonical personality traits.
So fans of an organized character tended to be organized themselves.
Often, yeah. It suggested these characters were acting as aspirational role models for some, or as really important sources of emotional support for others. It shows how deeply these fictional connections can weave into someone's identity and well-being. They're not just watching cartoons, they're engaging on a much deeper level.
And then there's tulpas. That sounds even more extreme.
It's definitely pushing the boundaries. Tulpas are described as autonomous mental companions created through sustained imaginative practice.
Autonomous mental companion.
Yeah. People who create tulpas through intense, deliberate focus develop what they perceive as real or somewhat real persons living inside their minds. They interact with them as separate beings.
Wow. So it's beyond just identifying with a character.
Way beyond. It's a testament to the, frankly, incredible power of the human mind to create and sustain companionship, even with purely imagined entities. It really blurs the lines of what we even mean by a real relationship.
Okay, so stepping back from the individual feelings, what are the bigger picture implications? Commercially, societally, these connections must have huge influence there too.
Massive. Absolutely massive. Let's start with the commercial side. Influencer marketing. It's basically built entirely on parasocial relationships.
Right, the whole industry.
Influencers become these perceived experts, or maybe more like trusted friends, and their posts, their recommendations directly influence what people buy. That imaginary intimacy built up through repeated meetings, seeing their posts, their videos, maybe getting occasional feedback.
Make you trust them.
Yeah, users often deliberately maintain the online friendship, and crucially, they trust the recommendations like they're coming from a real friend.
And that trust translates directly into sales for brands.
It's incredibly valuable. The PSR builds an influential bond of trust. The acceptance and trustworthiness you feel towards the influencer just gets carried over into the brand that is being promoted.
So if you feel close to a celebrity, you're more likely to buy what they endorse.
Definitely. Fans, partly wanting to build more intimate relationships with celebrities in their imagination, are often driven to make impulse purchases of endorsed stuff. And studies even show that higher follower counts make an influencer seem more physically attractive, trustworthy, and competent.
Which boosts buying intention even more. Wow.
Yeah. And get this, fans might even subconsciously start accommodating to characters' linguistic styles, like mirroring how the celebrity talks online. It just embeds the influence deeper.
It's not just individual influencers, though, is it? Big companies do this now, too.
Oh, yeah. Businesses are all over creating social media profiles specifically to engage with customers in a personal way. Think about those funny fast food Twitter accounts.
Wendy's, yeah.
Exactly. That witty banter, it's designed to foster PSI. And it works. It leads to higher loyalty intentions, makes people more willing to share information with the brand, especially if the replies feel personal, not automated, maybe give some behind-the-scenes flavor, makes you feel like you're talking to a person, not just a logo.
And CEOs getting involved on social media, that's part of this too.
Absolutely. A CEO's social media presence isn't just personal anymore. It directly impacts the company's image and reputation. They actively improve their public features online to connect personally with customers, investors, everyone. It builds a parasocial bond with the leader, not just the brand.
Okay, here's something weird I saw in the notes. Competitive spillover in fast food. How does that work?
Isn't that fascinating? Yeah, a study in the quick service restaurant world found that even positive stuff like customers posting good reviews or pictures of their food online, what they call in-store electronic word of mouth.
That seems good for the brand, right?
You'd think. But those posts trigger more parasocial interactions, likes, retweets, comments. And that engagement, surprisingly, can further lead to an increased competitive spillover.
Meaning it helps their competitors. How?
Maybe because it gets people thinking about that category of food, or they see related posts or friends comment about other places. The digital ripple effect is complex. It means store managers now really must practice diligence in monitoring customer social media posts, because a positive mention could inadvertently send business elsewhere.
That's wild. Okay, so wrapping up, what's the big takeaway here? Where are we heading with all this?
Well, the sheer rise of all this mediated communication, especially accelerated by things like the pandemic, it might have genuinely changed how our brains work. It's possible we've started evaluating these media figures using the similar or the same cognitive processes we use when interacting with real-life friends.
The lines are just getting blurrier and blurrier.
They really are, almost imperceptibly sometimes.
And these mediated friends, they're always with us.
Exactly. As one researcher put it, our mediated friends are never too far away. Instead, they actually rest in our pockets and sleep in our beds. That constant presence, that accessibility, it raises some really big questions for the future.
Like what?
Like, will we as a society find ourselves putting more effort, more emotional energy into these easier, maybe safer one-sided relationships? And could that mean we become less dependent on real social relationships as a result? The potential consequences of that shift,
Yeah.
they're huge, complex, and honestly, we're just starting to figure them out.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive really hammers home that these unseen connections, they are anything but trivial.
Not at all.
We've gone from figuring out what parasocial relationships even are, tracing them back to the 50s, sorting out that PSI versus PSR difference.
Right, the interaction versus the ongoing bond.
And then seeing how the digital world, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, just completely transformed and intensified everything, creating these amazing communities, but also sometimes real dangers.
And we've weighed good against the bad. The surprising benefits, like helping with loneliness or even learning.
Right. Dora the Explorer actually teaching kids better.
Yeah. But then also the serious downsides. The potential for exploitation, the unrealistic expectations, the body image stuff.
And finally, looking at what happens when these bonds break. That whole idea of a parasocial breakup and how surprisingly painful it can be. even maybe especially with fictional characters. It really shows how much these connections can burrow into our emotional lives.
It really does. This exploration highlights that these bonds, even though they're one-sided, they profoundly shape our perceptions, our actions, our emotional state in this modern world. So the next time you're scrolling or deep into a show or listening to something, you might just pause and think a bit differently about the connections you're forming, or maybe the ones that are ending.
So what's the big question that stands out to you listening? As technology keeps evolving, making these mediated friends feel closer, more real all the time, we're left with this really important kind of provocative thought, aren't we?
Which is,
Will we, as a society, find ourselves increasingly drawn to the comfort, the perceived safety of these one-sided relationships? And if we do, what could that ultimately mean for the complicated, the messy, the sometimes difficult, but ultimately irreplaceable bonds we build in real life with actual people sharing actual space?